Hello everyone, Tom Cosm here. Welcome to part 2 of the Ableton Live crypto sound design series. It's a series which is a little bit different, takes a weird approach to sound design. If you're interested in knowing what it's all about, check out part 1, which is the Bitcoin part. I go into depth of what I'm doing and why I'm doing this. So we're basically creating sounds that have something to do with these, that sound like these cryptocurrencies. So with Bitcoin we kind of had an 8-bit coin noise. And Litecoin, someone suggested in the last video that we use a nice light pad, like a nice fluffy pad. So I'm going to be doing that today. Those of you who are watching, please think about what we could do for Dogecoin. What would be a good sound? Probably something really fucking stupid. Imagine. So we're doing Litecoin today. It's going to be in 2 parts like it was last time. It's going to be kind of a sound design element where I do synthesis, and then we're going to do a little bit of Max for Live stuff. Okay, so a nice light pad. Okay, well, pads are a good starting place for pads is to usually start with a synthesizer. It's a good start. I'm using Operator, which is Ableton Live's really chunky synth, and I use it for most things. And just by default, we've got a single oscillator playing a sine wave. Doesn't sound that amazing at the moment. Not bad. What I'm going to do is I'm going to double click here, and I'm going to create a new clip. Double click the clip so we have our MIDI editor, and I'm going to draw in some chords. Now a nice pad chord would be a minor chord, like so. Let's just play that. Not bad. Let's bring it up an octave. So I selected them all, hold down shift and push up. Not bad. And I always find adding the 9th is nice as well. Now the 9th is basically an octave above plus another tone. So you go up 2 semitones, an octave above. So this would be an 8th. This is a 9th. There's that slightly mysterious feeling about it. So that's a good chord. Now let's go back to our operator here. Now, as I said, we've only got one oscillator, and it's simply playing a sine wave, which is very smooth. You can see the shape here, very smooth, no sharp edges, no harmonics. It's just pretty flat, not very good for pads. If we put a reverb over it, it might sound a little bit better. Bring the volume down because we're clipping. Keep the reverb there for now, but I'm going to be using a saw wave, because saw waves are a really good starting point for pads. So let's just click on the saw wave, change the oscillator. You'll now see that we have a straight line going down, which repeats over and over. So we've got all these sharp edges, or we've got all these harmonics here. So this will give us lots to work with, lots of texture that we can subtract from and play around with. Okay, sounding nice and thick. Let's just bring it down an octave again. So select all, or Command A, Shift and down. That's starting to sound like a pad already. Good. We're just dealing with one oscillator so far. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in a second oscillator. Now by default, if we go and look over here at how our oscillators are all working together, you'll see that they're all chained up in a frequency modulation mode, meaning that this oscillator will frequency modulate this, and so on and so on. We don't want that. We want to turn this into a kind of a subtractive synthesizer. So by clicking this mode, it means all 4 of these oscillators will all be getting mixed together. The waveforms will be getting mixed together, and we'll get a nice mixed signal. So we can pick different wave shapes for each oscillator and mix them up. So that's cool. So now we go over to this oscillator, we'll bring it to level. But you'll hear that this one is a sine wave, just like this one was before. So if I solo this one, mute this one, we've just got our sine wave again. So let's change this to a saw as well, and unmute this one. So now we have 2 exactly the same oscillators playing saw waves. And because there's no change in these, it's going to double the amplitude. Okay, the waveforms are completely aligned with each other, so it's just going to make the volume louder. But what we can do is we can slowly fine-tune one, which is slowly change the frequency of the second one. And by doing that, it's going to phase one of these vibrations, one of these wave shapes, slightly out of the other one, and you start getting a kind of a cool detuned effect, and it really thickens up things, especially pads or grunty bass lines. So let's bring up the fine here. Not too much, or it'll start sounding like a chorus. That's all good. I'm just going to go into my clip here, and I'm going to change the length to 8 bars, just so we've got a nice big long note or chord, and I'm going to select all 4 of these and drag them out for the duration of those 8 bars. Go back to our synth. Sounded good. Now I'm going to bring the spread up. Now the spread kind of detunes them as well, but it splits it to the left and right. speakers or headphones. So if you've got headphones on, you'll really be able to hear this. That's great. Now, of course, it's fun to play with the cutoff on the pads. So let's bring the frequency down and up with the cutoff just to see what it sounds like. Okay, but I'm not going to play with that for now because we're going to use this parameter as something we can adjust with our Litecoin price later on. So I'm going to just leave that for the main guts of it for now. I'm going to right click that and group it into a rack. So of course a rack means we can rack up different chains of synthesizers, so we can have multiple synthesizers working all together to produce the various layers of this pad that we want to create. I'm just going to rename this to saw so we don't lose track of what we've got, and I'm going to create a new synth in a new chain just by dragging down another operator underneath our saw. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to call this low. I'm not going to call it sub because I don't think we're going to get a sub frequency. Now this low one is just going to be another default sine wave pad for us. Very good. I'm just going to drag that reverb over into the saw, so the reverb is now only applying to the saw chain. Go back to our low. But with this low, I only want one note. I want the bottom note of this chord. Now if we have a look here, it's a G because we're working in a G minor 9. So I need something to filter that chord so it's only playing the bottom note. And we can do that by going into the MIDI effects area. Now MIDI effects are effects that you put before a synthesizer. You don't put them after something, and then audio effects go after. They affect the audio. MIDI effects muck with the MIDI information before it reaches the synthesizer. So it messes with the information that you're telling the synthesizer, and you can get it to do something else. And I'm going to use something called a scale. So I'm going to drag the scale down into this low, and you'll see it places it before the synthesizer for us because it knows it's a MIDI effect. And a scale simply means what notes you want to let through, basically. So what we can do is we can change the bass to G because we're working with the G chord. And you'll notice this is actually a piano here. It's kind of hard to see, but here's your C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F, G. Goes up like that. I'm going to change this to G. And what I'm going to do is turn off all of these other notes. So I'm only going to let through notes that are G, which is this bottom row here because we've changed the bass to G. So now if we play this, we're only getting the G out of that chord. But I want that to be a low note, so I'm going to go for another MIDI effect here, and we're going to go pitch. And I'm going to drag the pitch before the scale, and the pitch allows us to change the pitch of the notes. So by holding down Shift and pushing down, we can go down an entire octave, or 12 semitones, and now we should get a low G. And if we go down again, we'll probably get a real subby one. Yeah, I don't want the subby one for now because we're working with a pad, we don't really need bass. So there's our G. Now let's play it, let's unsolo this low and listen to it with the saws. Very good. I'm going to give that reverb on the saws quite a lot of wet for now. Great. Now, one cool thing to do, I think, with this low is to have it wobbling. We can have it wobbling up and down pitch-wise. So the easiest way to do that is to turn on the LFO of the synthesizer. And by default, you'll see destination A. This is saying, okay, this LFO, which is a low-frequency oscillator, where is that information being sent to? So a low-frequency oscillator being something that moves up and down very slowly, and you can attach that movement or that pattern or that shape. You can attach it to something within the synthesizer. So by default, the destination is on the pitch of A, B, C, and D, which is here, A, B, C, and D. So it's going to sway the pitch up and down at the moment. I'm just going to solo the low again, so let's have a listen. And we can change the speed here. I'm going to turn this R off, which stands for retrigger. That means every time the chord plays, it starts the LFO from scratch again. Just going to turn this off because it's a nice continuous pad. If it's on retrigger, every time that chord starts, we probably might get a little noticeable bump or a little bit of a skip where the LFO jumps back to its first starting kind of phase. So turn that off. Now I don't want it to mess with the pitch because it's a nice pad, it's a nice chord. It's all harmonic and beautiful and adorable and shit, so we're not going to mess with the actual pitch of the note. So I'm going to turn all those off, but we have a destination B here, so we can actually send it somewhere else. And if we click on this, we get a little drop down menu. It says, okay, well, where do you want this LFO to go? So I can pick the oscillator volume A. So now even though you can't visibly see the level going up and down, it's going to be moving the level up and down. So let's listen. Bring the amount up a lot. That's good. Let's bring the rate up. Excellent, but I'd like that rate to move around as well, because the thing with pads is they evolve and they move. You just need to play some notes and they move for you. You don't have to kind of tweak parameters all the time like I'm doing now. So what we can do is we can go and use a Max for Live audio effect, which is probably the most popular one, which is called LFO. Now if I drag the LFO after the operator, give it a second to load up, and you'll see we've got another LFO happening. So what we want is this LFO to affect the rate of this LFO, which is affecting the volume of that note. Now it's going pretty fast at the moment, so if I click on the map button, you can click on any parameter around here, or within Live you can click on anything you like, but we want it to be this rate. So while it's flashing, I click on rate, and it starts moving up and down for us. But it's going too fast, so let's bring the rate of this one down. And I don't want it to go all the way to the top and all the way to the bottom, so what we can do is bring the depth down, which makes it narrower, so it makes the range smaller. So if we bring it right down, you'll see how it's just floating around the middle now. Just play the note. I want it to go a bit faster, so what I'm going to do is bring the offset up. So we've narrowed it with this one, and then with this one we can offset it, we can make it higher. So this swaying to the left and the right will actually kind of move up a bit. Great, now we can bring that rate down. I'm going to bring the depth down a little bit more so it doesn't go too fast. Alright, let's bring the saws back in. Sounding good so far. Now, another interesting thing we can do here is be nice to have a kind of another tone playing that kind of has a bit of a, I don't know, like human voice sound or some kind of singing. Now, there's various ways we can do that. I'm going to be using an analog here. So again, I'm just dragging an analog down into my chain, or my racks here, my rack of chains, and we've got an analog. Now, an analog is another good synth. Let's just play it and solo it. So again, the first thing we notice is we've got all of the notes playing, so I can go over to this low, hold down the Option key and duplicate the scale over into the analog as well. So we did the same thing, so now the analog is only going to be playing one note, which is a G, right there. You'll also notice that this note doesn't extend, it doesn't last for a long time, and that's because by default the envelope of the amplitude or the volume of the synthesizer has no sustain. So that means the sustain point is 0. So sustain meaning where does the volume lie when the note is being sustained or held, and it's at 0. So if we turn this up to its maximum, which is 1, and play it again, you'll notice we now get a continuous note. That note's too high, so what I can do is we can go over to our oscillator here, our oscillator 1, and we can bring it an octave down using the oscillator. We could use another pitch like we did on the low, but it's just easier here to use this one. Now the reason I've used the analog is because if we move over to the filter section, so we go oscillator, filter, amplitude, very simple subtractive synthesizer setup. The filter, if we turn it on, one of the options is a format, and we've got a 6 decibel and a 12 decibel. It just means how drastic the filter is. A format filter is a particular type of filter that boosts and subtracts frequencies that emulate the human voice box, so you get that crazy kind of human rare vowel sound. I'm just going to bring the volume down, actually bring the volume down over here so we can mix it all properly later, just because I know this format filter can be quite loud. And if I bring this frequency around, you'll be able to hear it change. And we can kind of change the vowel with this resonance. Let's bring the frequency down here. That sounds pretty cool. Now what we can do is turn an LFO on, because it has its own LFO section as well, and apply the LFO, remember low frequency oscillation, slow pulse, we can apply it to this frequency here. So we need to turn the LFO on. The rate's at 0.9, that's probably going to be too fast, but we'll try. And to bring the LFO to make it apply to the frequency, we move over here, and you notice this middle area changes when we click on different areas. It gives us extra parameters for that area. If we click on the filter area, you'll see that the frequency modulation is an option for LFO 1. So if we bring this up slowly, that frequency is going to move around. I'm just kind of moving it until I find that point where it's hitting those kind of harmonics. They sound like extra notes over the top if you have a listen. They're going to be a really nice layer to our pad, I think. And I'm going to bring the rate right down, nice and slow. Let's play with the resonance a little bit. Let's bring the LFO up for the resonance as well, just a little bit. That's cool. What would it sound like with a chorus? So go over to my audio effects and throw a chorus after it. It's pretty cool. See what the feedback's like? No feedback. And of course, I reckon we should give that reverb as well to make it a bit more airy. There's a high cut on by default, so this is cutting out all the high frequencies. I'm going to turn that off and actually add a low cut and bring it up, so it's letting through all the high frequencies, cutting out the low ones. Give it some decay time, which is how big the reverb is, or how long the reverb lasts. And bring the dry wet up, which is how much reverb is applying. So we can bring it to 100%, which means there's no original signal. We can just have the reverb. That sounds pretty nice. Alright, let's listen to it, all three of them together. Starting to sound good, but every pad needs some white noise. So one more last thing, going to grab an operator, throw it in under everything else. Let's rename this to Vox. And the operator here we'll call noise. And we can pick, excuse me, we can pick a white noise waveform from the drop-down menu of what wave shape we want for our oscillator here. Again, I'm going to bring the noise down because white noise can be very noisy. There it is. Oh dear. Okay, it sounds alright, but it would be nice to do some, have that white noise doing something, or at least give it a bit of a filter so it's evolving as well. So I'm going to throw in an EQ8 after this. First thing I'm going to do is change the first pole into a shelf and get rid of all the low frequencies because you're just going to muddy things up. Let's kind of take out the 1K range, bring it down. And we can add one more pole in here, number 5, and bring it up and have it kind of moving around up here, I think. Great, so we can use another LFO there to move this up and down, which is this parameter here, the frequency. So let's go into Max for Live, drag in an LFO like before, map it to the frequency, whoa, and bring the rate right down. And of course, we wanted it to just hover around this area, so let's bring the depth down and the offset up. A bit more depth, a bit less offset. Let's have a listen. Maybe even a bit less offset. So it's kind of sweeping around this area. And one other thing we can add here, I reckon, is an auto pan. So an auto pan, what's happening there? Here we go. An auto pan will pan the sound from left to right alternating. It's quite a cool effect. So just by default, if I bring the amount up, we can change the rate, so it's kind of like an LFO, so we can go fast. We can also change the shape, so we can pick a saw wave or a down ramp here, which will give it make it a bit more sharp. We can also change the phasing of how far apart they are from each other in the left and right ears. And of course that rate would also be from with an LFO, so let's throw another one on. Lots of LFOs today. And we'll map the LFO to the rate and bring it down. Just for fun, let's put a flanger after it, because flanges are always good on white noise. And that's got its own LFO too, so they'll kind of be working together in a weird way. Let's bring the feedback down, because otherwise it's quite sharp. And I'm going to bring that white noise right down in volume, so it's a very subtle texture. Cool. I'm just going to play some notes on my keyboard here, just because I'm getting sick of that chord. But Alright, so I'm pretty happy with that sounds. Now what we need to do is I need to come up with a single macro knob that can change this sound, because remember what we're working with here is we're getting a single piece of information based on a cryptocurrency stock market, and whether that price is high, we want the parameter to do something drastic, and whether that price is low, we want it to do something drastic as well, but in the opposite way. So we can only have one parameter to tweak out this synth. So let's start mapping things to this macro knob. That would be cool. The first thing that comes to mind, of course, is the frequency of that saw. So I'm going to map, by hitting map, I select the frequency, I click on the macro, and now this is controlling this. Okay, that's good. Because we're trying to work with a floaty, airy, light pad, let's change the filter. You can see the shape here. Let's change it to let's try a high pass, see if that makes any difference. Give it a bit more resonance. I kind of like that. Let's just try a notch in case. So remember, a bandpass, sorry. So a bandpass has a bit of a hill, if you like. I like the high pass. Let's stick with that. Okay, so that's a good one. Now what can we have on this low? The low, can't really do too much with it. What we could do is we could simply map the volume like so, and have it so that when this is up high, the volume is down low. So we do this by looking up here. We can change the maximum and minimum values for that assignment. So at the moment, the volume is set to minimum negative infinity, which means when the macro is down here, it will be silent, and when it goes to the top, it will be 6 decibels. I want to kind of reverse this, so I want it to be maximum negative infinity, minimum will make it 0 decibels. So let me just close these down. You'll see now as I move this knob down, you'll see that this volume goes up, and as I move this knob up, the volume goes down. Let's see how that sounds. Sounds good. Now let's move over to our vocals thing. What do we got? What can we do with this? I think the simplest way for this is to just add another filter after it. So let's throw an auto filter right. We'll put it here before the reverb, so if there's a quick sweep of the knob, then it'll still have that nice reverb. Turn the auto filter onto a high pass, so remember only letting through the high frequencies, just like we did with the saw pad, because it's a floaty thing. We want stuff up in the high ends, not down in the low ends. The low pass lets through low stuff. We want a high pass that lets through the high stuff. And that means we can now map this frequency of this high pass filter we just created to that macro as well. And we shouldn't have to do too much with that, so let's play it now. Give it more resonance, which amplifies the point of cutoff, makes it a bit wet. And because that vocal sound has those really sharp kind of harmonic sounds, you know, when it sweeps through this frequency, you get those kind of harmonics. It'd be cool to have resonance to boost those as well. Excellent. Now over on the noise, let's do exactly the same, but what we can do is we can macro map it to this one pole frequency. So see how I just clicked on one of these poles, you can move the frequency. We click on two, we can move the frequency. Let's map it to this one frequency, but we want that one to have a minimum value of around 200 Hertz, because we don't want this to open up all the way to the bottom end. Otherwise we're just letting through unnecessary frequencies of the white noise, and we don't want that. So look over here, map, and we're picking frequency of number 1. Yep, map. And remember the minimum value for this, we said about 200 Hertz. So that should, let me just close this down so we can see it. So that should open up and close that. Now let's try it all together. I'm going to start with it completely the maximum value and slowly bring it down. So that ends part 1 of this cryptocurrency design. We've made a fat pad. I'm going to actually stop it here for today. I'm really hot. It's a hot day and I just want to turn my fan on. I'll get into the Max for Live component in the next one. I'll split this into 2 parts, so there'll be part 2 of this one probably tomorrow or the next day. So I hope you enjoyed that. Yeah, tomcosm.com. Check it out.